Good evening and welcome back once again to Channel 514, where we are continuing our series exploring ancient literature. Now, just last night, I posted a video on the early Greek poet Hesiod, and I'm thinking now of removing that video and replacing it with two or three more on this same poet in which we'll take a somewhat different approach, similar to the approach that we took with our two videos on the great Egyptian epic known as the Tale of Sinuhe. Now, these two videos were so far, I think, the only time where I've actually sat down and read through and commented on an entire work. And I thought that that one in particular was special enough and significant enough that that would be an appropriate thing to do, and that the work itself in its form and in its content really lent itself well to that approach. And so I think we'll do that again here and either leave the other one up or take it down. And probably I will take it down because right after having finished it I realized that there were a couple of pretty glaring errors in it. But anyway, let's just restate the little bit that we shared last night about the poet himself before going on to discuss his works. So anyway, we know little enough about Hesiod himself, and in fact, rather than having a very straightforward set of biographical facts about him, what we have is a legacy of legend and lore. So we're not sure, for example, whether the same author wrote his two great works, the Theogony and the Works and Days, just as we're not absolutely sure whether the same Homer wrote both the Iliad and the Odyssey, but for our purposes here we're just going to assume that both are by the same author. And I also brought up the issue of the time period in which Hesiod lived. Was it the 9th century BC, or the 8th, or the 7th, or the 6th, or the 5th? Different scholars will place him in any one of those centuries, although usually it's the 8th. And so for our purposes here, it doesn't really matter much, but if pressed on that question, I would just say the 8th. Anyway, he had probably a special devotion to the Muses, the goddesses of the arts and sciences, and this is believed to have been so because in the near the beginning of his poem, the Theogony, we find this story about the Muses specially giving the gift of inspiration and poetic song to Hesiod while he was tending his sheep on the slopes of Mount Helicon, a mountain in Boeotia which was sacred to the Muses. So we also, well, there has also come down to us a tradition that he was from Boeotia, a region in central Greece, which is, of course, where the city-state of Thebes was located, and where we find today the modern city of Thivi, and of course this is also where Mount Parnassus is located. The mountain didn't go anywhere. And on the slopes of this mountain, of course, was the great Panhellenic shrine of Delphi, where the Temple of Apollo was located, a major Temple of Apollo, and of course the Oracle of Delphi was here, and the great Pythian Games were celebrated here. Now, that's about all I want to say about him biographically, but actually there is one other thing, and I mentioned this in last night's video as well. It's very common to compare, it's the convention really, to compare and contrast Homer and Hesiod in a very particular way. So Homer is traditionally seen as the poet of royal courts, as a poet who moved in the circles of chieftains and kings and courtiers and thanes, and who had a very aristocratic sensibility, whereas Hesiod is usually treated as sort of a peasant poet, as a man who had a small farm and worked his own farm and also had this gift of poetic song and composed verse and performed it at the poetic contests, which were a pretty regular feature of Greek life in his time and for many centuries after his time. So, aside from a handful of lost works, which I have, which you'll find in number 2 of the 2 volumes in the Loeb Classical Library of the works of Hesiod, he has 2 great works, the Theogony and the Works and Days. Now these lost works are known as the Shield and the Catalogue of Women, and then there are a lot of fragments of various other works. So we have some fragments of his lost works. And what they're about really is heroic mythology. They're versions of all your favorite stories from heroic mythology. But the Theogony and the Works and Days survive in large measure anyway. So they're not complete, but we have most of them in the case of the Theogony, and perhaps all of it in the case of Works and Days. So we have more than fragments in any case. Now I'm going to go ahead and read from the Theogony in this video. I'm going to read probably about half of it and then stop and make another one with the other half of it, much like we did with the Tale of Sinuhe. And after that we'll do the same thing with the Works and Days. At least that's what I'm planning on doing right now. So we're going to use the 1973 translation by Dorothea Wender for Penguin Classics, and Dorothea Wender was a classicist at Wheaton College, Massachusetts. So who knows where, I've never heard of that school other than in this connection, although where I live in the Chicago area there's Wheaton College in Wheaton, Illinois, but anyway, that's where she worked, I guess. So we're going to go ahead and start from the beginning of the Theogony. And this title, Theogony, in Greek, Theogonia, means something like genealogy or birth or origins of the gods. And so it's the story of the origins and the early adventures of the Olympian gods, the great canonical gods of classical mythology, and their forebears like the Titans and the Cyclops and the Earth Goddess and the Sky God Uranos, etc. And after that, it also talks about the early adventures of humankind just a little bit, like the story of Pandora and her box, out of which came all of the sorrows and troubles that afflict humankind. So anyway, after about 8 minutes of that introduction, let's just dive right into this thing. So, beginning, Hesiod, Theogony. With the Heliconian Muses let us start our song. They hold the great and godly mount of Helicon, and on their delicate feet they dance around the darkly bubbling spring and round the altar of the mighty Zeus. They wash their soft skin in the horse's spring, or in Permesos or Olmeos, then dance, fair and graceful, on the mountain top, and whirl their feet about. Then they rise up wrapped in a mist, and go at night to him with lovely voices, Aegis-bearing Zeus, and Lady Hera of Argos, she who goes on golden sandals, and the maid, gray-eyed Athena, daughter of Aegis-bearing Zeus, Phoebus Apollo, Artemis, who delights in arrows, and Poseidon, he who shakes the earth and holds it, Themis, much revered, and Aphrodite, flirting with her eyes, golden-crowned Hebe, fair Dione, then Leto, and crooked Kronos, Iapetos, Eos, great Helios, bright Selene, Gaia, and mighty Ocean, and at last Black Night, and all the other immortal gods who live forever, all that holy race. The Muses once taught Hesiod to sing sweet songs, while he was shepherding his lambs on holy Helicon. The goddesses Olympian, daughters of Zeus, who holds the Aegis, first addressed these words to me. You rustic shepherds, shame! Bellies you are, not men. We know enough to make up lies which are convincing, but we also have the skill, when we've a mind, to speak the truth. So spoke the fresh-voiced daughters of great Zeus, and plucked and gave a staff to me, a shoot of blooming laurel, wonderful to see, and breathed a sacred voice into my mouth with which to celebrate the things to come, and things which were before. They ordered me to sing the race of blessed ones who live forever, and to hymn the Muses first and at the end. No more delays. Begin! We start, then, with the Muses, who delight with song the mighty mind of Father Zeus within Olympus, telling of things that are, that will be, and that were, with voices joined in harmony. The sweet sound flows from mouths that never tire. The halls of Father Zeus the Thunderer shine gladly when the pure voice of the goddesses is scattered forth. The echo spreads to snowy Olympus' peak and the immortals' homes. Then, sending out unearthly music, first they celebrate the august race of firstborn gods, whom earth bore to broad heaven. Then their progeny, givers of good things. Next they sing of Zeus, the father of gods and men, how high he is above the other gods, how great in strength. Next the Olympian Muses, daughters of Zeus who holds the Aegis, sing the mighty race of giants, and they please the mind of Zeus. The goddess who protects Eleuther's hills, Memory, bore them in Pieria to the father, son of Cronos, and they bring forgetfulness of evil, rest from pain. Far from the other gods, Counselor Zeus entered her holy bed and lay with her 9 nights, and when the proper time arrived, the months declined, and the seasons came around, and many days were finished. She gave birth on snowy Olympus, not far from the peak, to 9 like-minded daughters whose one thought is singing, and whose hearts are free from care. There on Olympus are their lovely homes, their polished dancing floors, and next to them Desire and the Graces have their homes, and live in happiness. With their sweet voice they praise the laws and courteous ways of all the immortals, uttering their lovely sounds. They went, once, to Olympus, reveling in their sweet voice, their heavenly song. Black earth echoed around the singers. Lovely noise rose from beneath their feet as they went up to their father. He had become the king in heaven, and held the thunder and bright lightning shaft, for he had beaten his father, Cronos, by force, and now divided power among the gods fairly, and gave appropriate rank to each. So sang the Muses of Olympus, 9 daughters begotten by almighty Zeus, Cleo, Euterpe, and Melpomene, Thalia, Erato, and Terpsichore, Polymnia, Urania, and most important one of all, Calliope, for she attends upon respected lords. And when the daughters of great Zeus would bring honor upon a heaven-favored lord, and when they watch him being born, they pour sweet dew upon his tongue, and from his lips flow honeyed words. All people look to him when he is giving judgment uprightly, and speaking with assurance, he can stop great quarrels sensibly. Wise lords are wise in this: when public harm is being done to the people, they can set things straight with ease, advising with soft words. And when a lord comes into the assembly, he is wooed with honeyed reverence, just like a god, and is conspicuous above the crowd. Such is the Muses' holy gift to men. The Muses and Apollo, he who shoots from far away, bring minstrels to the earth, and players on the lyre. Lords are from Zeus, and he is lucky whom the Muses love. His voice flows sweetly from his mouth, and when a man has sorrow newly on his mind, and grieves until his heart is parched within, if a bard, the servant of the Muses, sings the glorious deeds the men of old performed, and hymns the blessed ones, the Olympian gods, at once that man forgets his heavy heart, and has no memory of any grief. So quick the Muses' gift diverts his mind. Hail, daughters of Zeus! Give me sweet song to celebrate the holy race of gods who live forever, sons of starry heaven and earth and gloomy night and salty sea. Tell how the gods and earth arose at first, and rivers and the boundless swollen sea, and shining stars and the broad heaven above, and how the gods divided up their wealth, and how they shared their honors, how they first captured Olympus with its many folds. Tell me these things, Olympian Muses. Tell from the beginning which first came to be. So, there you have this great, well, what you might call a great invocation of the Muse at the beginning of Hesiod's Theogony, and we're going to go a bit farther from here, but I just want to comment on it a little. So you might remember from the Iliad and the Odyssey that each of these poems begins with an invocation to the muse, the epic muse, Calliope, but it only really goes on for a few lines in either case. Although once in a while the poet will refer again to the muse and ask her for further inspiration. But here our invocation to the muse goes on for lines and lines and lines, and begins with this interesting story about how the muses personally gave to Hesiod the gift of poetic song in some sort of special experience that he had on the slopes of a mountain that was sacred to them. So, where we're at now, he's about to sing of the beginning of things, beginning with what is called chaos or chaos. So, from this chaos emerge the earth and the sky, and, actually the sky from the earth, but in any case, the earth comes out of this chaos, and then the gods come into being after this, from the earth itself and the sky, so from a union between the earth and the sky. So the gods don't pre-exist this cosmos. No, it begins with this sort of formless chaos out of which things emerge. So let's move on from there. But anyway, that's what this first part of the poem is going to be about. Things emerging out of chaos, the gods coming into being, and then the gods battling among themselves for dominion. So let's go. Chaos was first of all, but next appeared broad-bosomed earth, sure standing place for all the gods who live on snowy Olympus peak and misty Tartarus, in a recess of broad-pathed earth, and love most beautiful of all the deathless gods. He makes men weak, he overpowers the clever mind, and tames the spirit in the breasts of men and gods. From chaos came black night and Erebus, and night in turn gave birth to day and space, whom she conceived in love to Erebus. And earth bore starry heaven, first to be all equal and equal to herself, to cover her all over and to be a resting place, always secure for all the blessed gods. Then she brought forth long hills, the lovely homes of goddesses, the nymphs who live among the mountain clefts. Then, without pleasant love, she bore the barren sea with its swollen waves, Pontus, and then she lay with heaven, and bore deep whirling Oceanus, Oceanus, and Koios, then Creos, Iapetos, Hyperion, Thea, Rhea, Themis, Mnemosune, lovely Tethys, and Phoebe, golden-crowned. Last, after these, most terrible of sons, the crooked scheming Kronos came to birth, who was his vigorous father's enemy. Again she bore the Cyclopes, whose hearts were insolent, Brontes and Steropes, and proud-souled Arges, those who found and gave the thunder and the lightning bolt to Zeus. They were like other gods in all respects, but that a single eye lay in the brow of each, and from this they received the name Cyclopes, from the one round eye which lay set in the middle of each forehead. Strength and energy and craft were in their works. So we'll pause again for just a moment. So out of the chaos you get earth, you get night, you get eros, or love, and the night gives birth to day and space, and the night mates with this thing, or this place known as Erebus, which sometimes in mythology is conceived of as part of the underworld, or as an antechamber of the underworld, or something like that. And of course the horrible pit of Tartarus, which again often appears in mythology and in literature as a place of horror or of punishment. And we find there are nymphs on the earth. There are these nature spirits on the earth. And you have all these beings who are often classed as titans, like Iapetos and Hyperion, Rhea, and of course Kronos, and Mnemosune, the mother of the Muses, and that name of course means memory. And then of course you have the Cyclops, Kuklopes, plural, the wheel-eyed, because they have an eye like a wheel right in the middle of their forehead. And here there are 3 of them, and they're children of the earth. And we find out that later they're going to make the thunder and the thunderbolt, which will be the signature emblem and the weapon and the scepter of Zeus, the ruler of the gods in classical mythology. So let's go on from here. Then mighty Uranos, that's the heavens, and Gaia, the earth, bore 3 sons, mighty and violent, unspeakable Kotos and Gues and Briareos, insolent children, each with 100 arms on his shoulders, darting about, untouchable, and each had 50 heads standing upon his shoulders over the crowded mass of arms, and terrible strength was in their mighty forms. So these 3 beings are known as Hekaton Keres, or 100-handers, 100-handed ones, and they also have 50 heads, so twice as many arms as heads, so I guess it evens out, but anyway, going on. And these most awful sons of earth and heaven were hated by their father from the first. As soon as each was born, Uranos hid the child in a secret hiding place in earth, and would not let it come to see the light. And he enjoyed this wickedness. But she, vast earth, being strained and stretched inside her, groaned, and then she thought of a clever, evil plan. Quickly she made grey adamant, and formed a mighty sickle, and addressed her sons, urging them on with sorrow in her heart. My sons, whose father is a reckless fool, if you will do as I ask, we shall repay your father's wicked crime, for it was he who first began devising shameful acts. She spoke, but fear seized all of them, and none replied. Then crooked Cronos, growing bold, answered his well-loved mother with these words, Mother, I undertake to do the deed. I do not care for my unspeakable father, for he first thought of shameful acts. He spoke, and giant Earth was glad at heart. She set him in a hiding place, and put into his hands the saw-toothed scimitar, and told him all the plot she had devised. Great Heaven came, and with him brought the night. Longing for love, he lay around the earth, spreading out fully, but the hidden boy stretched forth his left hand. In his right he took the great long jagged sickle. Eagerly he harvested his father's genitals, and threw them off behind. They did not fall from his hands in vain, for all the bloody drops that leaped out were received by earth, and when the year's time was accomplished, she gave birth to the Furies and the giants, strong and huge, who fought in shining armor with long spears, and the nymphs called Malii on the broad earth. The genitals cut off with adamant, and thrown from land into the stormy sea, were carried for a long time on the waves. White foam surrounded the immortal flesh, and in it grew a girl. At first it touched on holy Cythera, from there it came to Cyprus, circled by the waves, and there the goddess came forth, lovely, much revered, and grass grew up beneath her delicate feet. Her name is Aphrodite among men and gods, because she grew up in the foam, and Cytherea, for she reached that land, and Cuprogenes from the stormy place where she was born, and Philomedes from the genitals by which she was conceived. Eros is her companion. Fair desire followed her from the first, both at her birth and when she joined the company of the gods. From the beginning, both among gods and men, she had this honor and received this power. Fond murmuring of girls, and smiles and tricks, and sweet delight and friendliness and charm. But the great father Uranos reproached his sons, and called them Titans, for he said, They strained in insolence, and did a deed for which they would be punished afterwards. And night bore frightful doom, and the black care, and death, and sleep, and the whole tribe of dreams. Again, although she slept with none of the gods, dark night gave birth to blame and sad distress, and the Hesperides, who, out beyond the famous stream of Oceanus, tend the lovely golden apples and their trees. She bore the destinies and ruthless fates, goddesses who track down the sins of men and gods, and never cease from awful rage until they give the sinner punishment. Then deadly night gave birth to Nemesis, that pain to gods and men, and then she bore deceit and love, sad age, and strong-willed strife, and hateful strife gave birth to wretched work, forgetfulness, and famine, tearful pains, battles and fights, murders, killings of men, quarrels and lies, and stories and disputes, and lawlessness and ruin, both allied, and oath, who brings most grief to men on earth when anyone swears falsely, knowing it. And Pontos' firstborn child was Neros, the honest one, the truthful. The old man is called this name because he never errs, and he is gentle and remembers right, and knows the arts of mercy and the law. Then Pontos and earth produced great Thaumas, proud Phorcus, and Cato with her lovely skin, and Eurybie with her heart of steel. And Neros and Doris, lovely-haired daughter of Okeanos, circling stream, begot and bore in the unfruitful sea their children, most beloved of goddesses. And here come a lot of names. Protho, Eucrante, Sao, Amphitrite, Eudore, Thetis, Galene, Glauce, and Cumothoe, Speo, and quick Thalia, and lovely Pasithea, Erato, and Eunuche, with her rosy arms, and fair Melite, Eulimene, Agave, Doto, Proto, Ferusa, Dunamene, Nesaya, Actaia, Protomedea, and Doris, Panope, and the beautiful Galatea, and the lovely Hippothoe, rosy-armed Hipponoe, Cumodoce, who, acting with trim-ankled Amphitrite and Cumatolege, easily can still waves on the misty sea and calm the blasts of raging winds, Cumo, Aone, and garlanded Halimede, the one who loves to laugh, Glauconome, and next Pontoporea, and Leagore, Ewagore, Laomedea, and Pulunoe, and then Althonoe, Lucianassa, and Ewarne, lovely shaped, perfect to look at, graceful Psamathe, Menipe, Neso, and Eupompe, next Themisto, Pronoe, and Nemertes, whose mind is like her deathless father's. These are the 50 daughters of blameless Nereus, and they as well are skilled in perfect works. And Thaumas took Electra for his bride, deep-flowing Ocean's daughter, and she bore swift Iris and the Harpies, lovely-haired Aello and Occupete, who fly on their swift wings as fast as birds, or breath of wind. High through the air they hurl themselves, and Ceto bore to Phorcus the fair-cheeked Graii, gray-haired from birth, whom gods and men who walk on earth call Grey Ones, Pemphredo, well-gowned, and Enuo with yellow robes, and the Gorgons, they who lived beyond the stream of famous ocean, on the edge near night, where the clear-voiced Hesperides are found. Their names were Sthenno and Eruale, and Medusa, she who suffered painfully. Her sisters were immortal, always young, but she was mortal, and the dark-haired one lay down with her among the flowers of spring in a soft meadow. And when Perseus cut off her head, great Chrysaor sprang out, and Pegasus the horse, who is so called because his birth was near to ocean's springs. Chrysaor's name comes from the golden blade he held when he was born, and Pegasus flew from the earth which nurtures sheep, and came to join the immortal gods, and there he lives in the house of Zeus, and brings the lightning shaft and thunder to wise Zeus. But Chrysaor lay with a child of ocean, Callirhoe, and fathered Gerewon, who had 3 heads. The power of Heracles killed Gerewon in sea-surrounded Erythea, near the shuffling cattle. On that very day the hero drove the broad-browed cattle home to holy Tiryns, and crossed Ocean's ford, and killed the herd Erution and the dog Orthos in the dark stalls by Ocean's stream. She bore another monster, terrible, in a hollow cave, Echidna, fierce of heart, nothing like any mortal man, unlike any immortal god, for half of her is a fair-cheeked girl with glancing eyes, but half is a huge and frightening speckled snake. She eats raw flesh in a recess of the holy earth. Down there she has a cave of hollow rock, far from the deathless gods and mortal men. There the gods gave a famous home to her, and gloomy Echidna keeps her watch down there under the ground, among the Arimoi, a nymph immortal and ageless all her days. They say that Tupho, terrible and proud and lawless, loved this nymph with glancing eyes, and she conceived and bore fierce progeny, first Orthos, the dog of Gerewon, and next unspeakable Kerberos, who eats raw flesh, the bronze-voiced hound of Hades, shameless, strong, with 50 heads. And then again she bore the Lernaean Hydra, skilled in wrong, the one the goddess white-armed Hera raised, who was immensely angry with great Heracles. With warlike Iolaus' help, and through the plans of Athena, she who leads the host, the son of Zeus, Amphitronides, dispatched the Hydra with his ruthless sword. She bore Chimaera, who breathed awful fire, 3-headed, frightening, huge, swift-footed, strong, one head a bright-eyed lion's, one a goat's, the third a snake's, a mighty dragon head. Noble Bellerophon and Pegasus caught her, but she, subdued by Orthos, bore the deadly Sphinx, a curse on the men of Thebes, and the Nemean lion, a plague to men, brought up by Hera, the lady wife of Zeus, set down in the Nemean hills to live, destroying the tribes of men. And he subdued Nemean Tratos and Apesas, but he was conquered by the power of Heracles. And Ceto, joined in love to Phorcus, bore her youngest child, a frightful snake which guards the golden apples in that secret place of the dark earth at its great boundary line. And these are Phorcus's and Cato's progeny. Tethys bore whirling rivers to her mate Ocean, the Nile, Alpheus, and the deep eddying Eridanos. Strumon then, Meander, Ister's lovely flowing stream, and Phasis, Chresos, and the silver pools of Acheloos and Nessos, Rhodios, then Haliacmon, Heptaporos and Granicos, Aesepos, bright Simois, Peneus, Hermos, gentle Caicos, Sangarios the Great, Parthenios, Ladon, Ewenos, and Aldescos. Last she bore Scamander, shining holy stream. And she bore daughters, holy progeny, who, with the rivers and Apollo, Lord, have charge of young men over all the earth, for Zeus appointed them to do this work, Peitho, Admete, and Ianthe, next Electra, Doris, Primno, and divine Urania and Hippo, Clumene, Rhodea, Callirrhoe, Zeuxo, and Clutie, Idwia and Pasithoe, Plexaure, Galaxaure, and the loved Dione, Melobosis, Thoe, fair Polydore, Cerceis with lovely shape, and Pluto with her wide eyes, Perseis, Yanera, Acaste, Xanthe, and the sweet Petrae, Menestho, Europe, Metis, next Eurynome, Telesto, yellow-robed, and Chryseis, Asiae, lovable, Calypso, and Eudore, Tuche, and Amphiro, and Orchoroe and Styx, who is the most important one of all. These are the oldest daughters who were born to Oceanos and Tethys, but there are many others besides them, Oceanids, 3,000 nymphs with shapely ankles, who are scattered everywhere over the earth, and on deep water, glorious goddesses. There are as many roaring rivers, too, children of ocean, Lady Tethys' sons. It is hard for mortal man to name their names, but they are known to those who live nearby. And Thea, mastered by Hyperion, bore Helios the Great, bright Selene, and Eos, who shines upon all men on earth, and on the deathless gods who hold broad heaven. Eurybie, the shining goddess, joined in love with Creos, bore to him the great Astraios, Pallas, and Perses, greatly wise, and with the god Astraios Eos lay in love, a goddess herself, and bore the winds with mighty hearts, the cleansing Zephyros, and Notos, and swift-racing Boreas. And Erigenea brought forth, after these, the star Eosphoros, and all the stars which, shining, make a garland for the heavens. Then Pallas slept with Ocean's daughter Styx, who bore him shapely-ankled Victory and Glory in his house, and famous sons, Power and Force. They have no house apart from Zeus, nor any seat, nor any path, except where God commands them, and they sit forever at the side of thundering Zeus. Styx, Ocean's deathless daughter, planned it so. The day the Lightener of Olympus called to great Olympus all the deathless gods, and said, whichever of the gods should fight with him against the Titans would not lose his honors, but would keep the rights he had among the deathless gods up to that day. And those, he said, who under Kronos had no rank nor rights would be promoted now to rank and honors both, as would be just. And deathless Styx came to Olympos first and brought her children as her father advised. Zeus gave her honor and unequaled gifts, for she was made the great oath of the gods. Her children always live at Zeus's side. And as he promised, Zeus fulfilled his vows to all, and he rules greatly and is Lord. And Phoebe came to Koios's longed-for bed. Loved by the god, the goddess conceived and bore Leto the dark-robed, always mild and kind to men and deathless gods. Gentlest in all Olympus from the beginning, she was mild. Then Phoebe bore renowned Asterie, whom Perses led, a bride, to his great house. Last she bore Hecate, who above all is honored by the son of Kronos, Zeus. He gave her glorious gifts, a share of earth and of the barren sea. In starry heaven she has her place, and the immortal gods respect her greatly. Even now, when men upon the earth, according to the rites, make handsome sacrifices and entreat the gods for favor, Hecate is called. Great honors follow readily that man whose prayers the goddess graciously receives. And she can give him wealth, that power is hers. Of all the children earth and ocean bore, who once had privilege, she kept her due. The son of Kronos never did her harm, nor did he snatch away the rights she had under the Titan gods of old. She keeps her privilege in earth and sea and heaven as it was portioned to her from the start. Nor did she get a lesser share because she had no brothers to defend her rights. Her share is greater. Zeus is her advocate. Help and success come to her favorites. In court, she sits beside respected lords. In the assembly of the people, he whom she has chosen shines. And when men arm for men-destroying war, the goddess helps the men she wants to help, and eagerly brings victory and glorious fame to them. A splendid ally in the games when men compete. Then, too, she brings success and help. The man she favors wins by might and strength and gains the lovely prize with ease and joy, and brings his parents glory. She is good to stand by horsemen, also good for those who work the rude gray sea, and those who pray to Hecate and to the god who shakes the earth with crashes, get great hauls from her, the glorious goddess, if she wishes it. But just as easily she takes away all she has given if she wants it so, and she is helpful in the stables too, along with Hermes, to increase the stock. The herds of cattle and of goats, and flocks of woolly sheep grow numerous from few, if she is willing, or grow small from great. Thus, among all the honored, deathless gods, she is revered, although her mother bore no sons. The son of Kronos also made her nurse and overseer of all the young who from that day were born, and came to see the light of dawn who sees the world. And thus she is a nurse, and these are her high tasks. And Rhea, being forced by Kronos, bore most brilliant offspring to him. Hestia, Demeter, golden-slippered Hera, strong Hades, who has his home beneath the earth, the god whose heart is pitiless, and him who crashes loudly and who shakes the earth, and thoughtful Zeus, father of gods and men, whose thunder makes the wide earth tremble. Then, as each child issued from the holy womb, and lay upon its mother's knees, each one was seized by mighty Kronos and gulped down. He had in mind that no proud son of heaven should hold the royal rank among the gods, except himself, for he had learned from earth and starry heaven that his destiny was to be overcome, great though he was, by one of his own sons, and through the plans of mighty Zeus. Therefore he never dropped his guard, but lay in wait, and swallowed down his children. Rhea suffered endless grief, but when she was about to bring forth Zeus, father of gods and men, she begged the earth and starry heaven, her parents, to devise a plan to hide the birth of her dear son, and bring the fury down on Kronos for his treatment of his father and his sons, whom mighty, crooked Kronos swallowed down. They heard their daughter and agreed, and told her all that fate would bring upon the king Kronos, and to his mighty-hearted son. They sent her to the fertile land of Crete, to Leuctos, when she was about to bear her youngest child, great Zeus. And in broad Crete vast earth received the child from her, to raise and cherish. And she carried him with speed through the black night, and came to Leuctos first. She took him in her arms, and hid him, deep under the holy earth, in a vast cave, on thickly wooded Mount Aegaeon. Then to the great Lord, the Son of Heaven, the past King of the gods, she handed, solemnly, all wrapped in swaddling clothes, a giant stone. He seized it in his hands, and thrust it down into his belly. Fool! He did not know. His son, no stone, was left behind, unhurt and undefeated, who would conquer him with violence and force, and drive him out from all his honors, and would rule the gods. The strength and glorious limbs of the young lord grew quickly, and the years went by, and earth entrapped great clever Cronos with shrewd words, advising him to bring his offspring back. His son, by craft and power, conquered him. And first he vomited the stone which he had swallowed last. At holy Pytho, Zeus set firm the stone in broad-pathed earth beneath Parnassus in a cleft, to be a sign in future days for men to marvel at. He freed his uncles from their dreadful bonds, the sons of heaven. His father, foolishly, had bound them. They remembered gratitude, and gave him thunder and the blazing bolt and lightning, which, before, vast earth had hid. Trusting in them, he rules both men and gods. And Clymene, the lovely ankled nymph, daughter of Ocean, married Iapetos, and went to bed with him, and bore a son, strong-hearted Atlas, then notorious Menoetios, and then Prometheus, brilliant and shifty, Epimetheus, the foolish one, who first brought harm to men who live on bread, for he took woman in, the manufactured maiden, gift of Zeus. Far-seeing Zeus cast proud Menoetios down into Erebus. He struck him with the smoking thunderbolt, because he was insanely bold and reckless in his pride. And Atlas, forced by hard necessity, holds the broad heaven up, propped on his head and tireless hands, at the last ends of earth, in front of the clear-voiced Hesperides, for Zeus the counselor gave him this fate. Clever Prometheus was bound by Zeus in cruel chains, unbreakable, chained round a pillar, and Zeus roused and set on him an eagle with long wings, which came and ate his deathless liver. But the liver grew each night until it made up the amount the long-winged bird had eaten in the day. Lovely Alcmene's son, strong Heracles, killing the eagle, freed Prometheus from his affliction and his misery, and Zeus, Olympian, who rules on high, approved, so that the fame of Heracles the Theban might be greater than before upon the fruitful earth. He showed respect, and gave the honor to his famous son, and, angry though he was, he checked the rage he felt against Prometheus, who dared to match his wits against almighty Zeus. For at Mecone once there was a test, when gods and mortal men divided up an ox. Prometheus audaciously set out the portions, trying to deceive the mind of Zeus. Before the rest he put pieces of meat and marbled inner parts, and fat upon the hide, and hid them in the stomach of the ox. But before Zeus, the white bones of the ox, arranged with skill, hidden in shining fat. And then he spoke, the father of gods and men, and said to him, "Milord, most famous son of Iapetos, the shares you've made, my friend, are most unfair." Thus Zeus, whose plans are everlasting, spoke and criticized. But sly Prometheus did not forget his trick, and softly smiled and said, "Most glorious Zeus, greatest of all the gods who live forever, choose your share, whichever one your heart leads you to pick." He spoke deceitfully, but Zeus, who knows undying plans, was not deceived, but saw the trick, and in his heart made plans to punish mortal men in future days. He took the fatted portion in his hands, and raged within, and anger seized his heart to see the trick, the white bones of the ox. And from this time the tribes of men on earth burn on the smoking altars white ox bones. So, our story goes on from here with the tale of Pandora and her box, but I'm going to cut this off at 45 minutes, and we'll just do the rest of it. There's a about 15 more pages or so, so we'll just do the rest in our next video. So I hope you're liking the Theogony, and I'll probably have a few comments to make at the end, so thanks very much for watching, and do take care, and I'll be seeing you soon.